Today I would like to chronicle my life for future generations. My name is Judith Ann Skidmore Finley. I was born on September 24th, 1944 at Woodlawn Hospital in Rochester, Indiana. My parents were Mary Harrington Drake and Victor Hugo Skidmore. They were born and raised in Kentucky and moved to Rochester in 1940 when my grandfather bought land so that they could all have a family farm. I have one brother named John Albert, and he and I grew up as two farm kids. We had chores to do. He had to feed the pigs, and I had to take care of the chickens and gather the eggs. My favorite time of the year was when we got our baby chicks, and in the spring to grow in the brooder house. Half of them were raised for butchering, and the other half to produce eggs. When we butchered, my dad would wring their necks, and when they were dead, I helped pluck their feathers after they were dipped in hot water. We also had rabbits, cows, and sheep. My dad and his brother and cousins processed pigs and cows every year for the families to share as food. My mother had a huge garden. I helped her weed the garden and pick the produce. She canned and froze green beans, tomatoes, pickles, peaches, applesauce, pears, cherries, and strawberries. I helped to do all of these things, but I especially remember snapping green beans for to can. It was a tireless job. We were very self-sufficient, only buying staples at the grocery store. There was no one who ate any better or any healthier than we did. I lived a very simple life in the country. I had a tree swing, rode my bike, mowed the yard, and played outside all of the time. This life was so different from that of today. My father was a very selfless, hard worker. He was very outgoing and loved to be around people. He always took his daily drive around the countryside to look at the crops or just to visit the neighbors. He drove a school bus every day for a number of years and put that money aside to send my brother and me to college. My mother was also a tireless, selfless person who worked very hard at home. Her best virtue was her unconditional love for her husband and her children. She always said, "You can have friends, but there is no one like your family. Always keep them first in your heart." She also had a wonderful love for flowers and taught me the beauty of flowers, which I appreciate today. My brother and I were 3 years apart, and I wanted to do everything he did. We played baseball, basketball, and football, lots of board games. He helped me to become very competitive. He lives in South Bend now. We don't get to see one another as often as we would like, but we talk on the phone every week, and he is one of the nicest people that I know. I love him very much. It is hard to believe sometimes that I lived like this as a child. We did not have indoor plumbing until I was 5 years old. By all standards, we were poor, but I never realized it because we had plenty to eat, homemade clothes, and there was much love in our family. I went to a small country grade school named Ryder Grade School. There were 2 grades in each classroom. I loved school, and I won most of the math races and spelling bees. Great memories. I then went to Rochester junior and senior high schools. I was very active in school activities. I was the editor of my yearbook in my senior year. I graduated 3rd in my class. My friends and I went to all the ball games and the sock hops after the games. It was a pretty typical high school experience in the 60s. Slumber parties, cruising around the city, and out to the lake in the summertime. After high school, I went to Purdue University. I studied Spanish there and had a normal college experience. In the summer of '65, I went to Mexico City to study Spanish for 6 weeks at the University of the Americas. I stayed with a family there with 2 other girls, and we traveled throughout the country of Mexico every weekend. When I came back that summer, my grandmother took my cousin and me to Washington, D.C. to see all of the historical sites there. My last year at Purdue, in '66, Purdue went to the Rose Bowl, and I was privileged to go there by working for the travel agency that booked the tours to Pasadena. We went to Disneyland, Universal Studios, the Rose Bowl Parade, and of course the Rose Bowl game. That year, I traveled from coast to coast into another country. After these experiences, I knew I wanted to travel and see the world if I could. I later realized that I was very adventurous and unafraid to try new experiences. The world was waiting to be seen, and I hoped to see as much as I could. It was at Purdue that I met my husband, Patrick. He was studying hotel and restaurant management and was also in ROTC, which meant that when he graduated, he would be in the Army as a lieutenant. We dated and ended up getting married after he was commissioned in the Army. His first assignment was in Fort Bliss, Texas, at El Paso. We were there 9 weeks, and our first son, Michael, was born in William Beaumont General Hospital. From there, we went to Pittsburgh. He was stationed at an Air Defense Command post in Oakdale. He managed the officers' club there. We were in Pittsburgh for 3 years, and my second son, Tim, was born at McGee Women's Hospital in 1969. In December of '69, my father passed away with heart problems. This was very difficult to deal with since we lived so far from there. My mother came to visit us in January of 1970, and after this, Pat decided to look for another job to be closer to our families, so we ended up in Fort Wayne, as Pat went to work for Hospitality Motor in a management position. My mother visited often, and we went to Rochester to visit her a lot, and she became a very special grandma to our children. Shortly after moving to Fort Wayne, our third son, Brian Victor, was born in 1971. 4 years later, Daniel Bernard was born in 1975. Mary Kathleen was born in 1977. As they grew up, they attended St. Vincent's Catholic Grade School and Bishop Dwenger High School. Michael later went to Purdue University, Tim went to Indiana University, Brian went to Purdue, Danny went to Purdue, and then IU, and then Mary went to Notre Dame. They all graduated from college and have been extremely successful. And I actually graduated from IPFW in 1991 because I didn't want to be the only one in my family that hadn't graduated from college. They have beautiful families. Michael married Terry, Tim married Yukari, Brian married Lynn, Danny married Heather, and Mary married Todd. They have blessed me with 18 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. Michael has Sean, Matthew, and Jack. Tim has Emma and Maya. Brian has Patrick, Michael, Caroline, Marilyn, and Grace, and 3 step-grandchildren, Jeffrey, Chelsea, and Justin, plus 3 step-great-grandchildren, baby Stephen, Joy, and Lily. Danny has Colin and Lauren, and step-grandson Kyler. Mary has Penny and Rosie. These grandchildren are all the true joys of my life. I try to see as many of their activities as possible. Fortunately, I have 2 families living in Fort Wayne, and I get to see them often. I miss the day-to-day contact and experiences with the children in Chicago. I usually go to Chicago 5 or 6 times a year and get to see them as much as possible. When I am up there, we all 3 families get together, so that's always a lot of fun too. While my children were in school, I was very involved in various school activities. I was a den mother for Cub Scouts for 4 years, a Brownie leader for 3 years, chairman of the athletic committee at St. Vincent's, on the school board at Bishop Dwenger, and I was a co-chairman for Bishop Dwenger Saints Alive's charity auction. Through these years, I got to know many students and their parents. I have met my dearest friends through my involvement with these activities. I enjoy seeing many of these students and their children around town and at sporting events that I attend now. As for my spiritual life, I grew up attending a Baptist church in Rochester, but Pat and I were married in a Catholic church, and I became Catholic in 1973. My faith has gotten me through the difficult periods in my life. I am a firm believer in the power of prayer. I am a true believer in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I am so grateful that my children all had a Catholic education. It added a dimension to their lives that is hard to measure. They learned respect for life and for others. They learned about the joy of giving and helping others. I tried to instill these virtues in them, and it was great having them reinforced at school. I feel that their Catholic education is a prominent reason for their extreme success in their adult lives. I also have been blessed with some very good friends throughout my life. I still keep in touch with 2 high school classmates, Ann and Pam. It is still like old times when we get together and see one another. I also kept in touch with 3 college friends who live in Arizona and Baltimore. My dearest friend and roommate, Linda, passed away last year. That was a really tough loss for me. We experienced a lot of ups and downs in our lives over the years, and were each other's confidants, even though we lived 150 miles apart. I have met most of my other friends through activities involving my children and my participating in school functions. Madeline and Joyce and I have become the 3 amigos and have a very special bond of love and friendship. We have a broad circle of acquaintances and friends through each other. My cousin Kay and my sister-in-law Charlene are also very special. I feel so fortunate to have so many true friends that I can depend on and share my life with. True friends really are a blessing. We also had a very special pet named Molly. She was a real special member in our family. Throughout my life, I have been able to travel and see the world. These travels have given me knowledge, pleasure, relaxation, and treasured memories that I will never forget. As a child, we went to Kentucky to visit family and to Chicago. In the 50s, families couldn't afford to travel a lot. As I mentioned earlier, after going to Purdue, I went to Mexico City, Washington, D.C. with my cousin and grandma, and to Pasadena, California, to the Rose Bowl, all in the same year. I'm going to have to have some water. After I got married, we lived in El Paso, Texas, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania during the years in the Army. As the children got older, we went to amusement parks, camping in Kentucky, Pittsburgh, Gettysburg, and Washington, D.C. We went to the Smoky Mountains for a week. On spring breaks, we went to St. Petersburg and Fort Myers, Florida. We went to Nashville, Pensacola, and also New Orleans. Many of these were short trips, but nonetheless fun. We always stopped at college campuses during our travels just to show the children as many colleges as we could. Another very special memory is my trip to New York City with Madeline and Joyce. In 4 days, we saw Rockefeller Plaza, the Statue of Liberty, St. Patrick's Cathedral, Ground Zero, a Broadway play, Chinatown, Little Italy, ate at Tavern on the Green, took a carriage ride through Central Park, went to Times Square, ate fabulous food, and went to see Madeline's son Jason play in the Jets Stadium. Tailgated with the Jets team and went to the Today Show and Good Morning America. What a whirlwind and what fun. My son Tim's wife Yukari is from Tokyo, Japan. They had a wedding there and also in Fort Wayne. Tim treated Pat and me to a trip to Tokyo to come to the wedding. I was there for 2 weeks. We stayed at one of their homes, so we experienced Japanese culture firsthand. While there, we toured downtown Tokyo and rode to many places on the five-level subway system. We went to Buddhist temples, to beautiful gardens, to General MacArthur's office, took a trip down the river, had sushi, went to a kimono shop, took a trip to a national park, and went to the hot springs for a weekend and had a multi-course Japanese meal at our hotel. It was a fascinating experience, almost overwhelming to realize where I really was. For my 60th birthday, Tim and Yukari treated me a trip to Europe. My sister-in-law Charlene went with me. It was a dream come true for me. We flew into Amsterdam, went to our hotel, and took the canal tour around the city twice. The architecture is outstanding, the likes of which I've never seen before or since. There were 1,000 houseboats on the canals, all decked out differently. We had a very moving experience at Anne Frank House. The next morning we flew to London. We went to Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Harrods, Trafalgar Square, Piccadilly Square, to a Broadway play, took a ride down the Thames River, went to Sherlock Holmes Museum, took the double-decker Red Bus tour, saw Big Ben, Tower Bridge, the Eye, the Shakespeare Theatre, the Tower of London. One neat experience there happened because we met someone from Fort Wayne by accident on Piccadilly Square. As it turned out, I happened to know his family, and he treated us to dinner at our first pint of ale at the Greater Navy Club of London. That was a very special night. From there we flew to Paris, another dream come true. We walked to the Champs-Élysées the first night and looked for a place to eat dinner. We walked down Embassy Row and found 3 restaurants. We were looking at the menus, and I turned around, and behind me was the Eiffel Tower. I was so shocked. We ate filet mignon for dinner there and creme brulee for dessert while we were looking at the Eiffel Tower. From there we walked to the Arc de Triomphe and sat and took in the sights. The next day we took a double-decker bus ride through Paris, went to the Cathedral of Notre Dame, went to a creperie for breakfast, and to Angelina's for hot chocolate. We went shopping in Printemps, which is the largest department store in Paris, and later that night we went to the Moulin Rouge and saw the burlesque show. We went to the Louvre and saw the Mona Lisa among all the other Renaissance paintings. We went to the Latin Quarter and had fondue. We also went to Sacré-Cœur up on the hill overlooking Paris. It was there I got to practice my French with the artist who drew my portrait at the art fair. The next morning we boarded a train and went back to Amsterdam. What a scenic ride that was. We saw the quaint little farms, real windmills, a quail hunt with bird dogs. We went through Brussels, Antwerp, and The Hague in Belgium. Back in Amsterdam, we went to the Van Gogh Museum, to the Red Light District, the flower markets, Dam Square, and saw the street performers. What a charming city. When I turned 70, Tim and Yukari surprised me again with another trip, this time to Italy. I never thought in a million years that I would get to go there. We flew to Rome and spent the first day walking on the cobblestone streets, first to the Parthenon and then to some shops, and found a quaint little outdoor cafe for our first Italian meal. Home early, then up early for our tour of the Vatican and St. Mark's Cathedral. The size, the history, the artwork were totally overwhelming. The beauty and magnificence of the Sistine Chapel is very hard to describe. We spent several hours there. After shopping in the Vatican shops, we had our first pizza, different than American, but still very good. We then took the train to Trevi Fountain and to the high-end shops of the Italian designers. we went up the Spanish Steps to the Borghese Gardens, and then we headed back towards our hotel and ate at the plaza nearby in another outdoor cafe. The next morning, we walked to the Colosseum, the Forum, and the ancient ruins of Rome. It's hard to describe the size of this structure and to think it was built so long ago. Simply amazing. We took a double-decker bus ride around Rome after that, went shopping, and found another delightful cafe. The next day we took a limo trip to the Amalfi Coast, to Positano for lunch on the Mediterranean, and traveled along the coast to Pompeii. Back to Rome, we headed back to Rome on a superhighway going 90 to 100 miles an hour all the way. It was a real shocker. The next morning we went by train to Florence. We went to see the Statue of David and saw many artistic masterpieces. We had outstanding food in Florence, had gelato every day, walked the cobblestone streets, went to the cultural center in the heart of Florence, saw more major artworks. Oh, and I forgot the name of the bridge. And walked on the bridge to see the diamond. The diamond market. The next day we took a trip to Tuscany. We saw the olive trees, the vineyards, and the cypress trees. We had a wine tasting and Italian dinner on a farm with a vineyard. The view of the countryside was outstanding. From there we went to Siena and toured the churches and the big plaza where the horse race is run every year. Also went to some adorable shops with Italian pottery. From there we went to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Coming back to Rome, it was time to pack to take the train to Venice. What a special city. No cars, only boats or walking. We had a gondola ride, rode on the Grand Canal, saw the Bridge of Sighs, the Verrazzano Bridge. The city is so unique and very easy to get lost in. We went to the island of Murano to see the Venetian glass being made, and to Burano, to the home of Venetian glass. We then went back to St. Mark's Plaza to our hotel on a tour boat on the Adriatic Sea. It was very scenic and very relaxing. By then, our age had caught up with us, and we were very tired. We docked at the statue of Marco Polo and walked on the boardwalk back to our hotel. Our vacation was coming to an end. We especially enjoyed all of the wonderful Italian food, the fine wine, the architecture, the ambience of the sidewalk cafes, the beauty of the Tuscan countryside, and the fabulous Renaissance art. It was another overwhelming experience for me. My travels in the 60s took me to Panama City with Brian's family, to Bonita Springs with Danny's family, and to Puerto Rico with Tim's family. I also traveled to Yellowstone and Glacier National Park, the Black Hills, to Memphis, to Elvis Presley's home, to Nashville many times, and all over the beautiful state of Michigan. How blessed I have been to have seen so much in my lifetime. I have saved the Venice restaurant as the last chapter of my story. Pat and I bought this little Italian restaurant in June 8, 1981. We have been in business almost 36 years. I actually didn't start working there until my children were all in high school, but once I started, I never stopped. It is truly a full-time adventure. The restaurant business is a service-oriented business, but owning your own business entails so much more than I realized. You are working when everyone else is having fun. Pat probably works 12 to 14 hours a day. I usually work 10-hour days. I'm in charge of the waitresses, the advertising, the promotions, booking the bands, and I'm the catering manager as well. Pat orders the food and beverage, hires the kitchen staff, does the bookkeeping and banking, and makes big decisions. We each have our own roles, but they overlap too. We have succeeded in having a good partnership. We had very good business in the earlier years, being able to send 5 children to college. There have been lean years also, varying with the U.S. economy. We have become known as the best kept secret in Fort Wayne. We have excellent, authentic, hand-prepared food, and the restaurant is family-oriented. We have music on Wednesday and Fridays. We celebrate holidays, especially St. Patrick's Day. We have rehearsal dinners, showers, birthday parties, and a sporting event is always on TV, with many fans coming to watch, especially the Cubs, Purdue, and IU. The immeasurable part of owning a bar restaurant are the people who have come through the door through the years, our customers. We have formed wonderful relationships with the various people that come here. You know where they work, all about their families. In reality, they become a second family. We share their joys and their heartaches. When it comes time to retire, the customers as friends is what we will miss. The Venice restaurant has added a huge dimension to our lives. As I wind down my life story, I find it amazing all of the changes in the world that I have seen in my 72 years. I have lived through 5 wars, seen 14 presidents, and seen great strides in racial and gender discrimination. TV became popular, microwave ovens, astronauts flew in outer space, landed on the moon, the highway systems were enlarged into superhighways, telephone service had operators when I was young to place calls, dial phones became push-button phones, and now cell phones are everywhere. The computer world was non-existent in the 80s, and now it is totally in control of the world. I am happy to say that I lived the simple life when I was young. I still feel love and faith are the 2 keys to a happy and fulfilling life. And I am proud to say that I have shared love with many people during my 72 years. And my faith has helped me endure. There you go.
Wow. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great.
That's a long story.